Hello and welcome to Vinyl Safari. My name is Sean Patterson. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Steve Waxman. Steve is a Canadian music industry professional with an incredibly vast and impressive career. He's worked in artist management, creative marketing, promotion, and much more at such labels as Ready Records, Attic Records, and Warner Music Canada. Steve's pedigree of artists is far too numerous and frankly astonishing to mention in full, so I'll list only a handful of names to give you a basic idea. If the names Neil Young, Ed Sheeran, Jimmy Page, Bruno Mars, or Van Halen mean anything to you, this is a podcast you're going to want to listen to. And trust me, that is a very abbreviated list. Steve is also the host of the Creationist podcast, where he speaks with creatives of all stripes, and I would highly recommend you check it out. The Creationist is available wherever you listen to podcasts. In this episode, we discuss Steve's career, his insights from working with the cream of modern music talent, how things have changed in the industry in the current era, and much more. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please remember to subscribe to Oakridge Ave on YouTube, follow Vinyl Safari on your preferred podcatcher, and share the podcast wherever you can. Thanks for listening, and now I bring you Steve Waxman. All right. Hello, Steve. Thank you for coming on the Vinyl Safari podcast.
This is very exciting for me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you, man.
Yeah. So full disclosure to everyone listening, this is not our first rodeo with Zoom calls. In fact, we're basically veterans at this point. I met Steve over the summer while we were all sort of in lockdown on account of a few it was like a connection of a connection of a connection type thing, and it caught our ear that Steve Waxman, Warner Music Canada representative and various other amazing accolades, was doing a something of an artist development, building a narrative program that was a 6-week Zoom call. It was myself, a couple other guys from Oakridge Ave, and Shuffalo from Alberta, and Shakura Saida. And it was a really, really amazing experience, I have to say. And it was
Oh, great. I'm glad you enjoyed it, man.
And so maybe why don't we start there? What was the impetus for that project, and how did that all get going?
Well, I've been doing one-on-one, for lack of a better term, consultations with independent artists over the course of the year, and what I do, I call it entertainment career guidance. Mm-hmm. And the idea is to help artists move along to the next step of their careers, understanding what their goals would be, and then trying to help them achieve those goals by understanding what kind of thinking is happening on the other side of a boardroom table with regards to record companies and management people. So I've been doing that one-on-one with people, and I just got to thinking that, there have been a lot of conferences, obviously, that artists will go to get inside information, but also to try and network. And the reality is that they would sit in the back of the room, take in whatever information they can, and for the most part, network with their friends. And if they're lucky, they might run into somebody in the hallway that they saw speak. They'd give them their card, and that would pretty much be the end of it. So I figured that, why not sort of take the concept of a convention seminar and make it more focused, and have it be just for a small group of artists, a maximum of 5. We did 3 artists, but a maximum of 5, where everybody could actually have input. They could get direct feedback, and everybody could also bring into the meetings their own experiences and help one another. And I would guide it a little bit with the knowledge that I have and the background that I have. But, you guys have your experience, and I think that there's valuable things for you to share, as the other artists that were in this collaboration hub had to share with you guys. So I think that was the part of it that I wanted to accomplish something good out of it, and I was really excited that everybody seemed to really enjoy what they got out of it and seemed to have something valuable. I mean, I certainly got a lot of valuable information out of it as well myself.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great for us. I mean, first of all, given that, for almost every independent artist, certainly business as usual kind of ground to a halt over the summer.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, being able to at least still chip away at and work towards goals and start to build, like you say, a narrative, a structure in which to work and develop ourselves was really a welcome experience. And it was something,
Oh, cool.
it was unlike anything we'd had before, really, because we have mentors and people we've spoken to in the past who give us great advice and help us along. And there was just something really unique and different about the collaborative aspect, like you say, about being able to bounce ideas and experiences off of other artists as well as yourself. And I really, I can't say enough good things about that. It really helped us get into a good headspace moving forward. I mean, obviously, none of us expected to be,
Right.
more or less in a similar spot, however many
All
months it
these
is
months,
down the
yeah.
road now. But all things considered, it really did sort of shape how we went about the preceding half year in planning what to do and where to go from where we were after having released our record. So thank you,
Mhm.
first of all,
My
for
pleasure.
putting together that collaboration hub.
The other thing that was really exciting about it for me was that all three artists were so different musically
Mhm.
and from different parts of the country. So
Yeah.
I thought that was really, and at different stages of career and different stages of experience. So I think that was really exciting too, because even, someone, like Shakura, who's had a lot of experience, learned so much from you guys about the way you guys are you and Shuffalo are interacting with audiences now with
Mhm.
social media. And I think that you guys learned a lot from her with regards to, focusing on having specific goals and being able to visualize these goals and hopefully attain them that way.
Yeah, it was a really interesting group of people, and yeah, like you say, there was a weird synergy there that I really found quite wholesome and very beneficial. And it kind of felt like we were really quite good friends by the end of it.
Absolutely.
We'd been through all this craziness throughout the summer and got to learn all about each other's experiences and goals. Yeah, it was something else.
Cool,
Um,
man.
so yeah, I loved that. That was an amazing way to get to know you, and to get a sort of an insight into how you approach artist development and things like that.
Mhm.
So I want to take a little bit of a step back at the moment and hear a little bit more about your career beforehand. Would you mind just sort of giving us a general overview of your time working with these various record companies and artists before becoming more of an independent, I suppose?
My pleasure. I'll try to do the best I can to do a Reader's Digest version, though I
Okay.
tend to ramble a
Yeah,
little
there's a
bit. So
lot of history there, right?
there is a lot of history. So I'm gonna wind back the tape a little bit here. I did grow up in Toronto,
Mhm.
and did spend at least a couple of years wanting to be a rock star, but it didn't work out for me. Anyway, I did grow up in Toronto. I ended up going to New York to go to NYU to study to be an actor. And when I graduated, while looking for work, a friend of mine was the receptionist for Bill Aucoin, who was the guy that managed Kiss in the 70s. And at the time I went to visit her, his biggest client was Billy Idol. It also happened that I went to visit for, you know, pretty much right on top of the first major recession in the music industry. So the Aucoin offices had gone from, I think, something like 37 full-time employees over two floors on Madison Avenue to 8 employees on one floor, literally over the course of a week.
Yeah.
And I happened to be there just after all of that happened. So I was sitting there, I was visiting with my friend Milhan, who I said was a receptionist there. And she was like, it really sucks around here. It's really quiet. And, we're missing a lot of people, and we're having a hard time getting stuff done because we don't, in that particular case, we don't have an office boy to run, to run contracts around town and to deliver stuff and things like that. At the time, I was looking for a job in the advertising world. And I said to her, hell, I'd work here for nothing if I could use the offices to do some writing, because I had graduated from NYU with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in drama and dramatic writing. So I said, if I can use the offices here to do some writing and to be a place where people that I'm applying for jobs at could reach me, then that would be great. So she brought out the office manager, this woman, Stephanie Tudor, and Stephanie and I had a conversation, and I think this was on a Thursday or a Friday. And on the Monday I started, and the office opened up at 10 o'clock. And I like to tell everybody this, and whether it's the truth or not, it's so close to the truth that it might as well be the truth, that by noon, having never known that side of the music industry, by noon, just the couple hours that I saw what was going on there, it's like, this is what I want to do. I want to be involved with this side of the industry. This is really, really cool. I mean, I could see the possibilities with regards to working with artists. I had already heard a few marketing conversations, so it was like really fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. So I ended up working there for a couple of years, basically from the time that Billy Idol came off the road from promoting his first EP through the end of recording the Rebel Yell album. He was about to release the second single off of Rebel Yell, which I believe was the song Flesh for Fantasy. And that's when I moved back to Toronto.
Okay.
And I was here doing film editing of industrial films. That was so boring. But about 6 months after that, I ended up getting a job with Ready Records, which was an independent label here in Toronto that had the Spoons. And I was able to talk my way into being the director. I'm not going to even say director. That wouldn't be fair. I talked my way into doing radio promotion and publicity at Ready Records, having never done it before. I talked my way into the job. They offered me the job on the Thursday. On the Friday morning, I flew back to New York and went to Chrysalis Records, which was Billy Idol's label, and spent the morning with the head of radio promotion at Chrysalis, went for lunch, spent the afternoon with the head of publicity at Chrysalis. Wow. And I figured I'd learn what I needed to learn to get started. And then on Monday, I flew back to Toronto and went into the office at Ready and started my career. And I was at Ready for about 10 months. And we actually, the very first record I worked was the Spoons' Tell No Lies, which ended up being a top 10 single, which was great. And but after 10 months, the label just couldn't sustain itself, and they went out of business. I ended up going on the road with Honeymoon Suite, helping sell merchandise on the road and doing a little promo on the road with them that summer. And then a few months later, in December of whatever year it was, 83 or 84 or 85, I don't remember anymore. I got a call saying that there was a position available doing radio promotion and publicity at Attic Records, which was Canada's largest independent label. And I went in, spoke to Al Mayer, the president there, and he offered me the job of radio promotion publicity, and I got right into it and had a blast. I mean, we had some really super successful records over the years. We had a great success with a band out of PEI called Haywire. We had a lot of success with Lee Aaron. There was a Jennifer Warnes record, Famous Blue Raincoat, that was huge. I mean, we did a lot of really, really great creative things over the course of the years. And then in 92, in the spring of 92, I got a call from Warner Music Canada, and they said, we're looking for someone to head up our publicity department because our publicist has left. Would you be interested in coming to talk to us? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. And so I went in, spoke to them. I already knew these guys because, I mean, had been in the industry for a few years at that point, and I had enough of a reputation, and I'd known them from starting even from when I was at Ready Records, because Ready was distributed by Warner.
Right.
And I sat down with a guy named Dave Tollington, who was the head of domestic marketing, and he said to me, Steve, Warner is a bit of a dinosaur, and we need a virus in the belly, and we think that you could be the virus in the belly. And so I'm like, I accept. That's the kind. I like to think that I'm a creative thinker, and I like to I try my best to take a look at what's been done before and then go in the opposite direction, see if we can make a new path.
Right.
And so I fumbled along the way, tripped over my own laces. Because it's a big company. When you try to make a lot of changes in a big company, and you're one person that sees things so differently, it's like you really I had to make my mistakes and then take a step back and try and fix them along the way. So that was March of '92, and I was at Warner until August of 2019. So that's a long time. 27
Most
years
certainly.
at one label. I think it's some sort of record, must be. And in the middle of that, I was doing, as well as doing publicity, I was also doing video promotion. And for a 2.5-3 year period, on top of those two, I was also doing radio promotion. And that was the toughest time in my career, because when you're doing all of that at a major label, that's like a 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. job,
Oh, no
5 to 6 days a week. So, and then in August, there was it was time for change, and I struck out on my own with this idea of taking the knowledge that I have from all these years working major labels, independent labels, and management companies, and working with independent artists. I mean, so many, there's so many people out there that are trying to make it one way or the other in the music industry. And as someone said to me, it's like, they don't know what they don't know. And a lot, Steve.
Don't
so
know what they don't know. That's one thing I
and
learned.
a lot, Steve. So if you could, maybe, it would be really, really helpful to people to get access to the knowledge that you have and the guidance that you can give them. So that's kind of what brought me to here.
Well, fantastic. I've heard various parts of that story in fragments through the summer, and it just fascinates me every single time I hear. Well, I suppose I haven't yet heard the whole thing, but it's a whole other side of the industry that I give so little thought, because I spend so much time just thinking about doing the music and wide-eyed dreaming of being a rock star and whatnot. But yeah, that's fantastic. So I wanted to touch a little bit more on your idea of narrative. This was a really big core theme of the Collaboration Hub, was building and defining a narrative. And I was just curious to know what that means to you, and how you view that, and the importance of that for an artist in this day and age.
Sure. It's again, it starts with the artist having a vision. Vision and narrative to me are interchangeable words, and it goes back to the very first lesson that I learned in the music industry when that first week that I was working for Bill O'Coin, and he explained to me that those of us who are not the artist are facilitators, but we need to facilitate for the artist's vision. And certainly somebody like Billy Idol had a very clear idea of how he wanted to be seen in the world. The members of KISS obviously had a very clear idea of how they wanted to be perceived. It then becomes the partners, those of us that are on the other side of the table, to take the artist's vision and be able to help market that vision in a way that respects what the artist has in mind for how they want to be seen in the world. As I said, we're facilitators. So if for radio promotion people, we want to promote records using the kind of language that an artist would want us to use. The same thing for a publicist, and same thing for marketing strategies, and on and on and on. So everything needs to come out of the artist. So let's take vision and the interchangeable word, which is narrative.
Mm-hmm.
If the artist can articulate what their story is to their partners can then go and do their jobs on behalf of the artist, and the artist can feel confident that these people are representing them and are a part of the team. At the same time, by having that clear narrative, when you're writing songs, the songs don't stray too far away from the kind of band that you want to be.
Right.
And that's, and that's where we're talking about creativity. It's the same thing with the kind of content that you're creating. Also, is is it aligned with the narrative that you, as an artist, have articulated to people? And then from that, you can be fairly confident, when you have all that in place, that the audience that you're trying to reach understands what kind of artist you are, and can then, as they become fans, they, those fans are going out there and they're basically being your army, right? They're being the KISS army. They're being your army, and they're advocating on your behalf
Mm-hmm.
to their friends, and they're advocating using words that describe you the way you feel you should be described.
Right. So almost like sort of an oral tradition as an extension of the artist and music itself, something that sort of
Absolutely.
transcends what they actually do and builds it into something of a, I guess, something of a cultural artifact, as long as that is passed along.
Absolutely. I mean, you could call it a mission statement too, because I don't think necessarily that the words that come out of your mouth as an artist to define your narrative are necessarily the words you need to use
Mm-hmm.
when you're articulating to other people. But I think that they're the words that, if you decide that they're not the appropriate words to articulate, but they are the appropriate words to keep you focused on where you want to go and who you want to be. So, much like anything else, I mean, we talk, again, as you talked about, as a musician, there's a lot of things you don't think about. Well, once you start thinking about them, the business part of it, that doesn't mean that you're going to let everybody in on the business that you're doing. It just means that you're now aware of what needs to be done, and whether you're doing it yourself or you have somebody else doing it for you, whomever is doing it, whether it's yourself or somebody else, they can be held accountable because you have an understanding of what it is that you want to accomplish as an artist.
Right. Okay. That's fantastic. No matter how many times I hear that, it sinks deeper in every time I hear you explain it, because it just gets further and or I guess closer and closer to what the nub of it is. And it's something that, like I say, we really didn't even consider it as artists, despite the fact that we were participating in it for our favorite artists. I recognized what the narrative was and the vision was for all of my favorite artists, but it never really struck me to focus on what that might be for ourselves. So,
and they don't, again, excuse me. I mean, those artists don't necessarily sit down as a group and say, okay, what's our narrative going to be, and what kind of group? But they do. Well, okay, they don't sit around and say, what's our narrative going to be, and what is the message that we're going to give to people? But they do. You do. I mean, you get together with your friends and you start, hacking away on your instruments, and even if you're just playing covers, more often than not, you're going to lean towards a particular sound in the covers that you choose, because those are the things that are going to be cool to you, and those are the things that mean the most to you. And it'll get to the point even where you start taking covers from artists that are outside of what your core is, and you start to play them that they fit inside of that sound. And then when you start writing your own music, it also is inside of that sound, whether it's consciously or not. And more often than not, it's, look at you guys, when you're not playing and you're just sitting around, having a beer or smoking a cigarette, you're having conversations about music, and it's all a part of who do we want to be?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
it's funny that the actual playing part of being in a band and being an artist is like 2% of the entire experience, if that. So, and like you say, I mean, most of the experience I have with my band members is sitting around having a beer, listening to our favorite records, talking about our
Yeah.
favorite records, talking about guitars and all this. So, yeah, that's I did want to go a little bit more as well into sort of how things have changed over recent years. Obviously, this year is an anomaly in and of
Hmm.
itself, but there has been a trend over, gosh, well, I guess it's going on 3 decades now, where there's been a real fundamental change in the way people consume music and the role of music as a viable sort of career and money making thing. So I'm
Yeah.
intrigued to know what your general thoughts are about the way the music industry has changed, and maybe I guess if we could link in what narrative and vision has to do with that, and how, and if that has changed or if that remains the same and sort of has a significance at the core of the whole thing.
Well, okay. How I'm trying to think of
There was a
how to
lot in there,
articulate.
so
There is a lot in there, and
we can we can slow it
I'm trying
down.
to separate a few things. So obviously, the biggest change for me, and I think the biggest change is actually the most positive change. The biggest change, obviously, uh, is social media.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think social media, I call it the most positive change because what social media has done has given more power to the creative person to communicate directly with fans and potential fans.
Hmm.
There are no more, you no longer have to be concerned about gatekeepers. You no longer have to be concerned about whether or not you've been chosen to be in the newspaper or been chosen to be in a magazine or be chosen to be on a television show or be chosen to be, on a radio station. You can now create all of this content and put all of this content out and tell the story the way you want the story to be told. Even if you get an interview with a television station, they'll talk to you for 15 or 20 minutes and they'll do a 2-minute piece.
Hmm.
They'll tell the portion of the story they want to tell the way they want to tell it. Now you get to tell the story the way you want to tell it. And if that means it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour,
A
what do
series
you
of
want?
hour-long podcasts.
And absolutely, and that's the biggest change. It's like, I mean, and you can even see it in the contraction of media across the country. They don't know what to do with themselves. I saw over the course of the last 10, 15 years, as each new social media property emerged, and artists were building their own following on these platforms. The traditional media that we would set up interviews for, their big concern was, okay, we've done this piece and we've put it on TV or we've put it in the paper or whatever. Will the artist now share it on their socials? They were putting more value in the artist sharing it on their socials so that theoretically the media outlet could get more viewers or more eyeballs, as
Yeah.
opposed to the other way around, where you as an artist would want the media's, the people watching the media passively to discover you.
Hmm.
Now, I mean, obviously there's a lot more noise. I mean, when there's 6 billion Facebook pages and, you know, 600 television stations, there's a lot more noise out there, but we can't go back. So you have to, we're not putting the genie back in the bottle. So
Yeah.
you have to accept that there is this new way of doing things, that there's a lot more positive than negative in doing it. And as I said to somebody just yesterday, and I think I probably said it to you guys too in the summer, a lot of people, a lot of artists especially, look at social media as a chore, which is, to me, is ridiculous. You should look at social media as yet another opportunity to be creative.
Hmm.
You should be able to have fun with it. I mean, if you're lucky enough to be in a band that has 4 or 5 members, you know, people within the band, can take the responsibility of saying, okay, guys, today we're going to do a monkeys type video, or today we're going to, post pictures of us all drinking our favorite beer, whatever craziness
Hmm.
it might be. So rather than seeing it as, oh God, I got to post something today. What am I going to post? What am I going to post? It's like, be creative. This is
Hmm.
this is yet another opportunity. I mean, that's who you are. That's who, and quite frankly, that's who all of us on the planet are. Everybody on the planet is creative,
Yeah.
and it's just a matter of finding the thing that really, turns your crank. What's your passion?
Yeah, totally. It's it's definitely a learning curve. So it's weird for me to say because I mean social media has been around almost as long as I have. So I've had as and being brought up sort of in that era, I've had as much time as anyone to get to know it. But it's crazy just how fast the medium evolves, and how quickly things change. A couple of years ago, nobody was talking about TikTok. Now, if you're not on TikTok, I mean, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
There's more eyeballs on that than almost anything else. So, um, it's but
And you know what? And 5 years ago, it was Snapchat.
yeah,
So does that mean that TikTok's going to disappear in 2 years? It might, but while it's here, how are you going to take advantage of
I
it?
don't know if I'm a dinosaur for still using Snapchat. The band still snaps each other all the time.
Okay.
um, but yeah, it's almost overwhelming, but in a way, like you say, if you view them as opportunities for creativity and for expanding your influence and your audience and all of these things, it really does make a difference with how you utilize them, rather than making it
Right.
a chore, making it into, just another opportunity. That's something that we have been trying to work on of late, and honestly will continue to work on. I don't think there's ever really an end game with that kind of thing, but
Of
uh,
course not. Not for anybody.
yeah, but it's a good thing to be optimistic about that kind of stuff because, like you say, it's not
Yeah.
going anywhere.
Yeah. And it's look at it, and it's funny. I think that people look at signing with a major label as this great opportunity, but the reality is when you get signed to a major label, they're going to want you to continue doing the things that you're already doing.
Hmm.
I had um, a really great conversation with there's a singer songwriter called Alec Benjamin who's fairly popular out of the U.S.
Hmm.
And he did a lot of work on his own before he was signed to a major label. Well, actually, I shouldn't say he did a lot of work on his own. He was signed and dropped from a couple of major labels before he had started having big hits with Atlantic Records. But he did a lot of work on his own. And when he finally got a record deal, we were sitting having lunch one day. He had come up to Toronto to do some promo, and we were having lunch, and we started talking about how life is changing for him. And he said, I would do 10 things the best that I possibly could. And then I got a record company, and that meant I could do 10 things and they could also do 10 things. So that doubled it up. And then I got a good management company and they could do another 10 things. So now instead of me doing 10 things, there are 30 things happening for me.
Right.
The work never stops.
Hmm.
There's no easy path to success. And the important thing is to have realistic goals so that you always feel like you're successful.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's really, really important. I think that people, if your goal is to be, if your only goal is to be Lady Gaga or U2, you might get there, but oh my God, you're going to be so upset from day to day trying to
Yeah.
get there. Is because it's such a hard slog. If your goal, if you have if you have a big goal like that, that's fine. But for goodness sake, give yourself a bunch of little smaller goals that are within your grasp so that you can take each of the little steps to get to that grand vision that you have for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. um I Yeah, I don't want to belabor that one too much, but that's a really important point,
Pound,
for any
pound.
musicians
Yeah,
listening. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. So I did want to veer a little bit more into something a little different.
Sure.
So interestingly, I found this interesting, at least as a guitar player. Um, Fender guitars sold more guitars in the year 2020 than they did in any other year in their existence, which for me is exciting because I, you know, people always say, rock and roll's dead. The guitar, it's on the way out. You can't hear it in pop music these days, which is true to a large extent. But I've been in the corner fighting for the guitar for a long time, and I will
Yeah.
definitely not allow it to die in my lifetime. But it gives me a lot of excitement to know that there's this whole new generation of young people and older people who maybe have wanted to play instruments that just never had the I guess the drive to finally do it, are doing it
Mhm.
now, and that gives me a great amount of excitement just at the prospects of real instruments coming back into the forefront, which I hope happens. And I don't, it's never going to revolutionize music the way it did back in the 50s and
Right.
60s, and it's certainly got a lot of chasing to do if it's going to catch up to the role of the laptop today.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get your thoughts on that, on the potential for a resurgence of that type of thing, and just generally what it means to have a new generation of young musicians emerging.
Well, I think it's really important. Music, I think, is really important to
Hmm.
have in your life, and not just. I mean, listening. If all you do is listen to music, that's great. And I don't mean it's great because it's great for the music industry. I mean, I just think that it's great for everybody's soul
Yeah.
to find sound that can move them emotionally. But I know that for myself, and I know that for people like like yourselves, that being able to learn how to play even one instrument is an intellectual process that helps you in so many different ways. It helps you socially, but it also helps you intellectually, because it's a process where you're taking something you don't know, you're doing something that isn't easy, but you can immediately. I mean, I think at least that anybody can sit down at any instrument and give them just a few minutes, they'll be able to make a sound that's reasonably pleasant with that
Hmm.
instrument. Once that happens for you, it then becomes, okay, where do I go from this one note? And if you stick with it for 5 or 10 minutes, you'll find two or three notes that go together, and you'll start realizing that you're playing a song.
Hmm.
And then it just becomes, okay, now how do I become more proficient at it? Am I willing to practice more? And then eventually, do I see the possibilities of how do I create on this thing? What can I learn? There's, obviously, the greatest musicians in the world, are always talking about how they're still learning. I mean, as you said, there's no end. But that's part of what's fun about it, is that there is no end. So it's endlessly fascinating, no matter what instrument it is that you're trying to learn how to play. And at the same time, while you're trying to learn how to play that instrument, you're working a particular way, not unlike people that do crossword puzzles. It's like your mind is working in a way that if you didn't try to learn how to play an instrument, your mind just wouldn't click that way.
Yeah.
You wouldn't think of alternative ways of thinking about how things go together.
It kind of stimulates creativity in all kinds of different ways. It gets your mind. It's like an exercise in creativity almost.
Yeah,
I find the guitar to be an especially useful tool for that, simply because of how many different ways you can approach it, how many different ways you can make the same sound. And some of the most liberating things I can do on the guitar is figuring out multiple different ways to play the same thing, and you unlock
yeah.
all these different avenues that you wouldn't have known were there if you just stuck to the one. And I
Oh,
think
it's
that
crazy.
that
Yeah.
approach is applicable everywhere, really.
I mean, I've been playing guitar for almost 45 years now, and I'm only now beginning to. I mean, I've played a lot. I mean, I've played a lot, but I haven't understood a lot of what I've played. And I've only now started to understand that, you know, you can play, you don't need to play full chords. You can play pieces of chords, and you can play pieces of chords on many different areas of the fretboard, and you can play them in, all different kinds of ways with all different kinds of rhythms. And you could hold the pick a different way and it sounds different. I mean, it's really, that kind of stuff is really exciting. And I mean, it's funny that you say, that you bring up that in 2020 more guitars were sold by Fender than in any other year in their history, because prior to that, prior to 2020, the guitar was becoming out of vogue. The sales, Gibson had to, Gibson sold its company and things like that. It's
Yeah.
like, and the only thing that seemed to be propping up the guitar industry at the time was Taylor Swift and acoustic guitars being sold to young girls. And I think that what happened in 2020 with the lockdown is people wanted to learn how to play an instrument. The instrument that has had its death knell is the upright piano. And
Right.
I think that this is sort of, personally, I just think that bringing a guitar into the house is a lot easier than bringing in a brand new piano.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so it's an opportunity for people to learn instruments. But I think that that's the thing. It's like, can we give kids access to instruments to hold in their hands so that they can learn? And it doesn't have to be rock and roll. I
Hmm.
think the one thing that has sucked, but okay, you and I, we wanted to be rock stars because that's, so there's nothing wrong with kids today wanting to be pop stars,
Hmm.
but their access to what pop stars are so different than what your access to what rock stars were and what I mean, just between you and I,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
huge difference. Where, when I wanted to be a rock star, it came out of, the 4 or 5 magazines that we would see on a regular basis, and Don Kirshner's rock concert and Burt Sugarman's in concert. So and that was it.
Hmm.
And then, in the 80s, there was MTV. And and I guess you're sort of from the later 80s, early 90s, really,
Hmm.
becoming, falling in love with that kind of stuff. But when you fell in love with that kind of stuff and Nirvana is the biggest musical act in the world, then that's your perspective. When Ariana Grande is the biggest artist in the world, then kids today want to be pop stars. And that means there's 20 people writing a song, and a lot of that song is composed on a computer.
Hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
so long as those kids are not just taking samples and pasting them together. They're understanding what makes a song a song.
Yeah. And you can tell the
And
difference. I've heard some
yeah,
incredibly creative uses for synthesizers and loops and all the kinds of things you can do with laptops. And yeah, it really does make a difference when you tell that there's some real creativity going on. And
yeah,
it's the same thing with, not exactly the same thing, but the same impulse with somebody discovering something new on something like the guitar.
yeah. Well, the computer's just it's a different kind of instrument. The thing is, again, it's like, how creative are you going to be? Or are you just copying and chopping what other people have done?
Yeah.
It would be great if you understood how that sound was made, and that means, understanding that there was a human being with an instrument in their hands
Yeah.
making that sound, that you use that microsecond of a clip to move your track along.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really interesting time to like I have I really wish I was more proficient with building the basics of songs and things on computers, because I still like, if I want to record a demo or work on a song to send to, one of the other bandmates, especially these days when we can't get together, I still am like miking up my amplifier and
Hmm.
singing and doing bass, and I don't even use percussion because I don't have a drum kit and all this stuff. And then I have a cousin who's incredibly proficient at making electronic dance music, and he can turn around an entire song that sounds, as far as I can tell, original, creative, interesting, and almost fully completed in an hour and a half. And it's just crazy that like the way that
Yeah.
we the people apply skills and their time and what you can accomplish. And he also is a musician. He plays the guitar as well, so he
Hmm.
he similarly has a trepidation about just reusing samples that other people have made, and he goes out of his way to make his own and to incorporate things like guitar and all that. But it's
I mean,
wild.
I had a conversation with David Guetta a few years ago, and
Really.
I said I asked him, I was like, you don't play an instrument, but you write songs. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I don't play an instrument, but I know what the sounds are, and I can tell somebody what the sounds are, and they can go get them for me. And
Yeah.
and that's not just samples, but it's like, you write a song like Titanium, and anybody can hum, anybody can go, and
Yeah.
and you if you can't play the keyboard, you can hum it to the person that can play the keyboard.
Right.
And if they're playing a bunch of notes that you think are good, and then there's a couple of notes that you don't think are right, then you sit with them and you try and find the right notes. So anybody can write a song. Not anybody can write a good song, but anybody can write a song.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that universal creativity you were talking about earlier, and just
Yeah.
having the tools available to flex that muscle, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, my wife is regularly annoyed by the fact that I will sing sentences to her as opposed to just talk to her.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
My fiance is not going to be happy about me discovering a new way to annoy her. But
You're welcome.
she's away at the moment, so it's all good. I'll just make sure I get really good at it by the time she gets back from school. So when last we spoke, you'd mentioned a really interesting idea to me, that you said
Mm-hmm.
sort of sprung a little bit off of some things we talked about during the collaboration hub, when I brought up something called Joe's Mill, which Kingstonians listening, I'm sure, will be familiar with, but that stands for Musical Instrument Lending Library. And essentially that's a library, but instead of books, it's musical instruments, and people can come and rent them out for periods of time, and it's entirely free of charge. And they have fostered a lot of young and old musicians in Kingston, and influenced an incredible amount of people. And you came back at our last meeting with this
Mm-hmm.
idea of sort of upscaling that to what I think you mentioned it as like a young musicians registry or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
a
yeah,
national registry for kids, kindergarten through grade 12,
right.
and that kids would become a part of this registry, and as a part of this registry, they would somehow have access to musical instruments. They would have access to, if not free, somewhat subsidized lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, if they don't have free instruments, maybe subsidized rentals. I don't, I'm still working out, trying to work out how this could actually work. And then they would have, access to, Zoom conversations and instructions from recording artists, that can tell them about their own experiences, but also maybe give them clues on, how to unlock the secrets of the violin, how to unlock the secrets of the guitar, the drums, how to, how to mix records. But
Yeah.
and when I say mix records, I mean, DJs
Yeah.
DJs mixing records, and how does a hip hop producer produce? Well, I would love for people to, kids to understand, what happens in a writing room when there are 7, 8, or 20 people
Mm-hmm.
involved on a track. How does that happen? And what do different people bring into the room so that they can understand what kind of contributions they could make musically?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea, and I've been thinking actually a lot about it since you first mentioned it, and just how much of an impact it can have, just taking down a few of the barriers to entry for
Yeah.
young artists. And it's one thing to say, oh, I want a guitar for Christmas. You get a guitar, you noodle around for a little while, maybe your parents buy you lessons, you get sick of it after a month or two, and it collects
Mm.
dust under the bed. But having a whole swath of amazing opportunities and materials and things available right off the bat, where you're not so much climbing the ladder the way that you used to. I think is a really great idea, and something that I would very happily promote and be a part of to whatever degree I could, when it gets off the ground. I think it's fantastic, and it goes hand in hand with this um, seeming resurgence of people playing real instruments and the guitar and
No, for
whatnot.
sure. I think that one of the things is that, if you get I mean, I bought, I wanted a guitar for my 10th birthday, and I got it, and then I didn't play it. But I always loved playing music, and the reason I wanted it is because, I think I wanted as many musical instruments around me as possible, so that if I had a whim, I would go, And I mean, it's interesting. I had a conversation, on my podcast, the first episode of my podcast. I talked to Jim Cuddy from Blue Rodeo, and he talks about his creative process in writing a song. The thing that he said that I thought was really interesting and has carried over to all the other subjects that I've talked to is, the idea of not just waiting for inspiration to hit you, but to work towards inspiration. And sometimes what that meant was, rather than sitting with his acoustic guitar and playing the same G, C, D chords over and over again until something came to his head, it's like he has a studio where he can walk from one instrument to another. And if the inspiration's not there on the guitar, maybe it'll be there on the piano, maybe it'll be there on an upright bass, maybe it'll be there on a mandolin,
Yeah.
And I think that if somebody's really passionate about guitar, get a guitar. But if you're just exploring music, then get a guitar for a week or two. But like, spend that week or two like trying to learn stuff.
Yeah.
And then go get another instrument and see if you can play the same stuff on another instrument. I mean, imagine, it's like, I don't know if you ever heard this, but, growing up and trying to learn how to play lead guitar, one of the things that, one of the piece of advice that I always got was, learn how to play sax solos on guitar. Because the saxophone, the range of the saxophone is similar to the range of the guitar, but saxophone players attack the notes differently than guitar players do. So, and I was like, okay, well, and that's what I started thinking, is like, if I can play, I mean, I'm fortunate. I've got a bunch of different instruments around the house. If I can play the same, if I can play something on guitar, and then I go pick up my ukulele and figure out how to play it on the ukulele, and then, it's like, it sounds different. And then if I go and play it on, on electric keyboard, it'll sound different still. Because at that point, it's like, okay, I can start putting other notes around it. And then I go back to the guitar with those new notes. I mean, it's just, that's the thing that's really great about it. Like, it's like a jigsaw puzzle,
It's a jigsaw puzzle without the square edge borders around it.
That's exactly
right. Build it
man.
Wherever it needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And not all the pieces fit.
Yeah. Yep. And God knows that there are a lot of pieces that don't fit. But you know what? Those pieces fit somewhere else. So
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's exciting. I just think it's really exciting. And I think that I really want to say is, I think that what you do as a musician, writing songs, I think that's magic. That you can write a song, there was nothing. And then sometimes after 5 minutes, there's a song. And sometimes after 5 months, there's a song. But there's a song. And it's not, I have no trouble picking up a guitar and writing a chord pattern and going, this is really great. But then I can't put any words to it. That's a total struggle to me. That you guys can, pick up your guitars and basses and amps, and the drums and stuff, and that you can write a piece of music and then you can put lyrics to it and then it becomes a real song, is unbelievable to me. I mean, like I said, that's like magic. And I had this experience, early on, again, with the Billy Idol thing, when he was writing songs for the Rebel Yell album. They would rehearse every single day, downtown in the Village. And every day at the end of the day, I would go down there to whatever, have them sign papers, deliver checks or whatever. And I would hang out and sit there at the rehearsal hall while they were working on new material. And there's a song on the album called Do Not Stand in the Shadows. And I came there one day and they played the song, and they had just written it earlier that day. They played the song, and when the song was over, I looked at Billy and I went, "Who did that originally?" He goes, "What do you mean?" I went, "Well, that's a cover. Who did that originally?" And he's like, "No, we wrote that earlier today." And I was like, that was the first time that somebody, I had been around somebody that wrote a song that was fully like, this is a great song. Like, this is a hooky. My friends and we'd written songs. I'd played in bands, but it wasn't like this.
Yeah.
This was a different level. And it's like, and again, it's like, it's magic.
It totally is. That's the thing that keeps me doing this, even when, when you lose all hope, which fortunately we haven't, but especially in a year like this past year, I suppose, the magic is what makes it worthwhile. And it keeps it worth putting the pen to paper and worth picking the guitar up and creating things, dinky little crappy stuff that, like the amount of voice memos I have that will probably never become full songs. But just that exercise, that flexing the muscle, is such an important thing, and it keeps the magic there for me. And the 1/10 of 1% of the memos I make that become songs that end up on a CD or a record or played out on a stage or on somebody's Spotify playlist, and they go on to show their friends. Magic is the way to describe it. Like, I don't even know how that happens. We're nearly at 50,000 streams of our top song on Spotify, and I can't even believe that there are that many people who listened to it. I don't know how that happens. We wrote a song, that the chorus of that song was written on the subway in Toronto because Ian made me write a chorus to it, and I didn't want to. I did it like 30 seconds. We laid it down, and it's suddenly, 50,000 people have listened to it. So it's crazy. And
that's amazing.
John Mayer.
That's amazing.
John Mayer said, being on stage, playing music and stuff, it's like the closest thing to having a superpower.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to put it. I mean, he is a superhuman in my books, but I'm striving for that superpower still.
Well, if I can share a story that you've heard before, and if I can swear a little in this, it would be good. Makes
that's
the point.
What podcasts are for.
Yeah. So I have told you this story before, but I'm going to share it again. And if anybody has made it this long into the podcast, then you're welcome. Here's a bonus for you. So back in 2014, I had the opportunity to work with Tom Petty, and I'm a huge Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers fan. And as we were waiting for the interview to start, we were out in Malibu, and when we were waiting for the interview to start, he and I were having this conversation, and I was telling him how I got into his music. And I said to him at one point, what's really amazing to me is, like, you've released so many records and there isn't one shitty song on any of the records. And he kind of looked up at me and smirked and said, "Well, we just don't let anybody hear the shitty ones." And and that's so freeing, because that's the thing. You can create. That doesn't mean that everybody has to see everything that you create. So it can, from time to time, it can be crap, and that's okay. Like I said, I say this a million times a week, it seems. It's like nobody learned anything by being right all the time. And it's the same thing with creativity. Not everything that's going to come out of your brain, not everything that's going to come out of your hands, not everything that's going to come out of your mouth is going to be fantastic. But the only way to get to fantastic is to go through crappy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That is a brilliant way to put it. So I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I do have a couple rapid fire questions I like to ask at the end. Now, these are a couple of them are generally more geared towards artists, but you're a musician as well. I figured.
Thank you very much. I was gonna say, I didn't want to have to say it.
There's a good way to tweak them that'll make them make perfect sense. But anyway, first of all, Beatles or Stones?
Stones. Well, Yardbirds actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that's great. Most people have said Beatles so far, actually, so that's good. I'm glad to have a Stones in there. I find it hard to make a decision. It has more to do for me generally, and for most of the people I've spoken to, just to do with like childhood exposure.
So I'm old enough that I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Right.
My brother, I was like, okay, I'm not that old that I actually understood what was going on.
Yeah. You were
But
present.
I was present. But my brother is 8 years older than me, and my sister is 13 years older. So we were watching it because they wanted to see it. So I knew that there was something that was going on. That being said, the first rock music that really attached itself to my brain were the Yardbirds. And that was through the film Blow Up. And when I go back, and I'm not a huge Beatles fan. There's a bunch of songs that I think are terrific, and I'm more of a George Harrison guy than
I love George Harrison.
Lennon and McCartney. But when I go back and I listen to Beatles records, and I try to be open-minded, there's always a few songs on most records that I'm like,
Yeah.
When I go and listen to Stones records, though, I mean, since we're talking about Beatles and Stones, when I go back and listen to Stones records, there's fewer of the songs on Stones records are because I'm a riff guy, and they write great riffs. Yeah, much more of a riff guy than a sweet melodies kind of guy.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually. I'm somewhere in the middle. I absolutely adore riff rock and roll, but yeah, like I say, I think it's got to do with more of a childhood exposure thing for me. What my parents listened to around the house.
Right.
All right.
My dad was tone deaf, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about my dad.
And my mom was in the Toronto Jewish choir, so there's a real dichotomy there.
Oh yeah. Just Dad, by the way, in case you're listening, which I know you will be, I'm not disparaging you at all. Never mind. Passing thought that I'm going to leave. He's the reason I play guitar, so
Nice.
And he's also my biggest fan. So cheers, Dad.
Awesome.
All right. Albums or singles?
Albums.
Yeah.
Absolutely albums. I went on a vacation with a buddy of mine 100 years ago. We went to Hawaii together, and I brought 5 to 10 albums with me on cassette. He brought mixtapes.
It's a different beast. I'm
Absolutely.
I think originally when I first started really getting into music, I was more of a single listener. I think many people are really when there's a certain artist or song that catches your ear, or certain styles that draws you in, and naturally you evolve the attention span to listen to full albums and appreciate them more.
I mean, I think that's the thing. When you're a kid, the idea that it's a body of work just doesn't compute.
Translate. Yeah.
All
right. So you mentioned that you don't tend to write songs as often, I suppose, as someone like me, but when you do write, is it music first or lyrics first, or how do you approach that?
It's always music.
Yeah.
It's always music. And then I have melodies that sometimes stick and sometimes don't stick, but words, I wrote a lyric in 1980 or 81, and the lyric was, she's got the best seat in history. That's all I got. And when I was finishing up my interview with Jim Cuddy, I said to him, I told him this, and I said, the lyric is, she's got the best seat in history. And he just looked at me and went, well, where are you supposed to go from there? Like, really, you've pretty much said it all, haven't you?
Yeah.
In one line.
Who knows? Maybe that was the stroke of genius moment. All else need not be said.
Well, that being said, and one of the interesting things is, are you familiar with the act Guided by Voices?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, well, they're worthwhile checking out. It's basically a project by one guy, but it's a full band. But early on in his career, his songs were never longer than 2 minutes. He wrote what he wrote, and then it ended. And when I found that out, I was like, oh, wait a second. That means you don't have to write 3 verses and 3 courses and a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
You can just, like, when the story's finished, the story's finished.
Yeah, that was
And the, and the same way with Neil Young on the song Ohio, where that third verse where he's just doing na-na-nas because he said everything that he had to say in the first 2 verses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think most artists, if they stick with it long enough, will find that there are, maybe it's a specific musician or a specific song that just sort of shatters the rule book for them.
Yeah.
I've had many experiences like that. But yeah, there really is no formula to do it in any particular way, unless you want to be a pop star, I suppose that formulas are good. But
well, even at that, it's like, I mean, I think about musically with pop music today, the bridge has disappeared.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
It's a shame. Sometimes, often the bridge is my favorite part of many songs. But
a lot of times it's the most interesting part of a song,
yeah.
musically at least. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I split my last question into a couple because
Sure.
person of your position, I'm curious to know if you would if you had just one piece of advice for artists in the current era, what would that be?
This one's easy.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be concerned with success. Be concerned with greatness.
I like that. It's a lot to chew on there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's like, again, it goes back to what I said before with regards to, setting goals for yourself and things like that. It's like, what is your measure for success? More often than not, it's financial. And if you don't reach it, will that upset you? But if your goal is to be great, you can always strive for greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll never be disappointed because everything that you do is a step towards that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the regular final question I ask is just, what's someone or a band that everyone should be listening to these days, in your opinion? What struck you lately?
Gosh, can you give me half a second here, because I can't remember the kid's name. I heard this kid on the Spotify recently, and I just think he is terrific. His name is, come on, get up here. Come on, I think he's from Cambridge or Kitchener. 347 Aiden.
Okay.
And he's a hip hop artist, but kind of a punk rock hip hop artist. He's as far as I can tell, he's independent. Although I saw on his Instagram page that Sony Music is following him, so I'm sure that they're, if they haven't put their hooks in yet, they're trying.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. No, I love, one of my favorite things about this podcast is I learn about so much new music to listen to. So I'll definitely have to check them out.
And definitely check out Guided by Voices too. I mean, they've got so many records out, and I think that you'll dig what they're doing. It's not much. It doesn't really fit in with what you guys do, but that doesn't matter. It's just great rock. I mean, and then there's the Hold Steady, which is a really cool band too.
Right.
That people should check out. But yeah, 347 Aiden would be my recommendation today. Fantastic. For something that I've just found out about 10 days or 2 weeks ago.
Awesome. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Steve, for coming on the podcast. It's great to talk to you again. Always great to pick your brain and hear your insights. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what develops from this musicians registry and everything like that. So I guess we'll have to keep in touch, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, and you too. And please, and I want to put a plug in for my own podcast, The Creationists.
Oh yes, I meant to do that. My apologies. I have my notes here, and it's the one that I forgot to do that I realized I forgot to write down as soon as we started the call.
No, that's cool. No, I just, if people have a chance to listen to The Creationists, it's a podcast about people who create, and it's a wide variety of people that I speak to, from people like Jim Cuddy and Gordon Lightfoot, filmmaker Ron Mann. There's golf course architecture. It's just the idea is all the different ways that people can create. I try to find people that are doing that for a living to hopefully inspire people to find the creativity in themselves.
Fantastic. Yes, check out the Creationists podcast. It's on Spotify.
Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else. Yeah.
Wicked. All right. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you, man. It's great to see you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Vinyl Safari. If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow Vinyl Safari on whichever podcast platform you're using. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to Oakridge Ave to catch the latest episodes, new music, and more. We greatly appreciate your support. You can also learn more about Steve online at imstevewaxman.com, and you can follow the Creationists podcast at the Creationist Podcast on Instagram. Definitely check it out and give them a follow on your preferred podcatcher. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next Vinyl Safari.